AITA for changing my locks and getting my stepbrother arrested after my dad kept giving him my spare key? 29M, never thought I'd be writing here, but I need some serious perspective because my entire family is imploding and half of them are calling me heartless while the other half are finally seeing what I've dealt with for years. The background. Let me paint you the full picture here, because context matters. I've been working in IT since I was 22, starting at help desk level and working my way up to senior systems administrator. For 7 years, I lived in what can only be described as a commune nightmare, a rundown house with 5 roommates, sharing one bathroom, dealing with passive-aggressive post-it notes about whose turn it was to buy toilet paper, and finding mysterious science experiments growing in Tupperware in the fridge. I saved every penny I could, often eating ramen for weeks straight, skipping social events, and working freelance projects on weekends just to build up enough for a down payment. 6 months ago, I finally did it. I bought my own place, a 650-square-foot, one-bedroom condo in a decent building downtown. It's nothing fancy, but walking through that door for the first time with my keys to my place where no one could eat my clearly labeled leftovers or use my expensive shampoo, I literally cried. This condo represents 7 years of sacrifice, missed opportunities, and grinding through 60-hour work weeks. Now, about my family dynamics. My mom died when I was 13 from cancer. It was just Dad and me for 2 years, and we were close, or so I thought. Then when I was 15, Dad married Sandra, who came with her son Jake, then 11. From day one, the dynamic shifted. Jake had lost his father young too, and my dad seemed determined to be super dad to him. Meanwhile, I became the responsible one, who didn't need as much attention. While I was working part-time jobs at 16 to save for college, Jake was getting new gaming consoles because he needed cheering up. While I was taking out student loans and working nights at a call center to afford community college, Jake was dropping out of his 3rd program. First it was business, then art, then music production, with Dad saying he just hadn't found his passion yet. When I was 25 and sleeping on an air mattress in that shared house, debugging code until 3 a.m., Jake was 22 and living rent-free in Dad and Sandra's finished basement, supposedly launching his podcast that released exactly 2 episodes. The thing is, I never hated Jake. I just wanted equal treatment. But every family gathering became about Jake's latest project or struggle. When I got my first promotion, the family dinner to celebrate turned into an intervention for Jake's latest crisis. He'd been kicked out of his friend's apartment for not paying rent for 4 months. The key situation. When I bought my condo, my dad actually did help with the down payment, a $15,000 loan that I'm paying back with 4% interest over 5 years. We have a written agreement and everything. He acted like he was doing me this massive favor, though he'd given Jake about $30,000 over the years for various failed ventures with no expectation of repayment. But I digress. Dad lives about an hour away in the suburbs with Sandra. When I moved in, he asked for a spare key for emergencies, and to check on the place if I traveled for work. This seemed reasonable. I do occasionally have to travel for server installations or conferences. I gave him one spare key with the explicit understanding it was for emergencies only. The first incident. 2 months into home ownership, everything went to hell. It was a Thursday in late September. We'd had a catastrophic server failure at work that started at 6 a.m. and didn't get resolved until 10 p.m. 14 hours of crisis mode, angry executives breathing down my neck, and trying to recover data from corrupted backups. I was mentally and physically exhausted. I dragged myself home, fantasizing about the craft beer I'd been saving and maybe ordering Thai food. But the moment I walked in, something felt off. My apartment has a specific smell, a combination of my cologne, the lavender cleaning products I use, and just me. But there was something else. A sickly sweet perfume I didn't recognize, and something musky underneath. The throw pillows on my couch were arranged wrong. I keep them at the corners, but they were centered. There were water rings on my glass coffee table that I'm obsessive about keeping clean. My bedroom door was closed, and I never close it because my cat, yes, I have a cat, Mr. Whiskers, who was hiding under the bed traumatized, likes to roam freely. I checked my bedroom, and my bed was made differently, the comforter tucked in all around when I just throw it over. There were unfamiliar marks on my sheets. My bathroom trash had been emptied and a new bag put in, except I just changed it that morning before work. Why would someone change an empty trash bag unless they were hiding something? Then I went to grab that beer I'd been fantasizing about. I had 6 craft beers from a local brewery, the expensive kind at $8 each. 3 were gone. The rage started building, but I tried to rationalize. Maybe I'd forgotten drinking them? But then I saw it in the new trash bag, poorly hidden under some paper towels, a used condom. My stomach turned. I immediately called my dad, my hands shaking with anger. At first, he played dumb, but after I described what I'd found, he finally admitted the truth. He'd given Jake my spare key, just for the afternoon, because Jake had a Tinder date and his current roommate situation was complicated. Complicated turned out to mean Jake was couch surfing again after being kicked out of another shared living situation. Dad actually had the audacity to say, "I figured you wouldn't mind since you were at work anyway. It's not like you were using the place." I lost it. I mean really lost it. I told him Jake had stolen from me, violated my privacy, had sex in my bed, in the space I'd worked 7 years to afford. His response still makes my blood boil. "Come on, son. Brothers share. It's what family does. I'll have Jake Venmo you for the beers. No harm done. No harm done. No harm done." I told him this was completely unacceptable, that Jake was never to set foot in my apartment again. He apologized, said he understood, promised it would never happen again. The second incident. 3 weeks later, in mid-October, I was nursing a mild cold and decided to work from home. I'd set up at my dining table with my laptop, coffee, and tissues, grateful I could attend meetings in sweatpants. Around 2 p.m., I heard keys at my door. I assumed it was maintenance. They'd sent an email about checking smoke detectors that week. The door opened, and Jake walked in with a woman, both of them laughing about something. He was giving her the grand tour of his place, pointing out the view, offering her a drink. They were both tipsy already. The look on Jake's face when he saw me was priceless, pure panic. The woman looked mortified and confused. "What the fuck are you doing here?" Jake actually had the balls to ask me this in my apartment. I stood up, told the woman she needed to leave immediately, that this was my apartment and Jake was trespassing. She grabbed her purse and practically ran out, muttering apologies. Jake tried to play it off, saying Dad had told him I was at work, that he just needed to borrow the place for a couple of hours, that I was being an uptight asshole about a simple favor. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I told him he had 30 seconds to get out or I was calling the police. He called me every name in the book but left. As he was going, he said, "You know, this is why nobody in the family actually likes you. You're a selfish prick who only cares about money and things." I immediately called Dad. His response was infuriating. He defended Jake, saying the poor kid was just trying to date like a normal person but couldn't afford his own place. He actually said I'd had it easier than Jake and should be more understanding. When I reminded him that I'd worked since I was 16 while Jake had been coddled his whole life, Dad said I was being cruel and materialistic. He promised again that he wouldn't give Jake the key. Swore on my mother's memory. That should have been my biggest red flag. The third strike. 2 weeks ago, and I remember this vividly because it was the day I was supposed to get my quarterly bonus, I left a team lunch early with a migraine. I'd been looking forward to going home, taking my medication, and sleeping it off in my dark, quiet apartment. I could hear music from the hallway. My music. Jake had somehow connected to my Bluetooth sound system and was playing some god-awful EDM. I opened the door to find him with yet another woman, both half-dressed on my couch, making out. My $60 bottle of Japanese whiskey, a gift from my boss when I got promoted, was empty on the coffee table. There were 2 lines of white powder residue next to it. The woman screamed and grabbed her clothes. Jake, though. Jake looked annoyed. Not ashamed, not apologetic, annoyed. Like I was interrupting him. "Dude, seriously? Can you give us like 20 minutes to finish up?" I started recording again and told them they had 2 minutes to get dressed and get out before I called the cops. I made sure to get clear footage of the drug residue. The woman was out in under a minute. Jake took his time, even stopping at my fridge to grab another beer for the road. When I blocked him and demanded the key, he laughed and said he'd given it back to Dad already. Dad had made him another copy. The confrontation. I drove straight to my dad's house. Probably shouldn't have been driving with that migraine and that much rage. Sandra answered the door and immediately knew something was wrong. When I explained what happened, showing her the videos, her face went through several emotions: shock, anger, resignation. "Your father told me you were letting Jake use your place sometimes," she said quietly. "I thought it was nice of you." When Dad came home an hour later, we had the fight to end all fights. I laid it all out, every violation, every boundary crossed, every bit of trust broken. His responses were a masterclass in gaslighting and manipulation. "Jake's had a harder life than you. Both his parents are alive and have bankrolled his entire aimless existence. You're being materialistic about your possessions. My home is not just a possession. Family helps family, that's how we were raised. When has Jake ever helped me? Your mother would be disappointed in how selfish you've become. My mother, who worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, would have been livid. I helped with the down payment, so technically I have a say in how the place is used. A loan with a legal agreement is not partial ownership. You're tearing this family apart over nothing. Nothing. Sandra interrupted, taking my side. She revealed that Jake had been stealing from her purse for months, and Dad always made excuses. They ended up in a screaming match while I left, but not before telling Dad that if Jake entered my apartment again, I would press charges. The lock change and escalation. The very next morning, I called a locksmith. $400 for high-security locks that can't be copied at hardware stores. Another $300 for a Ring doorbell camera and an interior camera. I also paid my building security an extra $50 a month to put my apartment on their special watch list. I didn't tell Dad any of this. I sent Dad a formal text, screenshotted from my records, effective immediately. Neither you nor Jake are permitted to enter my apartment. Any attempt to do so will be considered trespassing and will be met with legal action. His response was a novel-length guilt trip about how I was destroying the family, how he'd never expected such cruelty from me, how my mother would be spinning in her grave at my behavior. Sandra texted me separately with disturbing information. Jake had been bragging to his friends about having access to a downtown bachelor pad. He'd been scheduling his dates around my work hours. She'd overheard him on the phone saying he could guarantee availability certain afternoons. My home had become his personal brothel. Update 1. The attempted break-in. For a week, things were quiet except for the bombardment of texts and calls from various family members who'd heard Jake's version of events, that I'd thrown him out on the street and denied him basic family support. My aunt called me crying, saying I was heartless. My grandmother left me a voicemail about the importance of forgiveness. Then came last Monday. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed with a Ring notification. I discreetly checked it and nearly gasped. Jake was at my door, trying to use a key. When it didn't work, he tried another. Then another. Then he actually pulled out what looked like a bobby pin and a screwdriver and started trying to pick the lock. I excused myself from the meeting, saved the video, and called building security. Marcus, the head of security, was there in 3 minutes, but Jake had already fled. Marcus reviewed the building's cameras and showed me something disturbing. Jake had been casing the building for the past week, trying to slip in behind other residents, hanging around the garage entrance, even trying to social engineer his way past the front desk by claiming he'd lost his key and I was expecting him. Marcus had actually turned Jake away twice, noting that he wasn't on my approved visitor list. I had a feeling something was off about him, Marcus said. He got aggressive when I wouldn't let him up, said I was just a rent-a-cop who didn't understand family. Update 2. The police report and arrest. That evening, I went to the police station with all my evidence, the videos from inside my apartment, the Ring doorbell footage, the building security tapes, and a timeline of events. The officer, Detective Morrison, took it seriously, especially when I mentioned the drug residue in one of the videos. This is clear attempted breaking and entering, she said. With a history of unauthorized entry and theft, you have grounds for a restraining order at minimum. I filed a report and texted my dad one last warning. Jake was caught on camera attempting to break into my apartment. I have filed a police report. If he comes near my building again, he will be arrested. This is not negotiable. Dad called immediately, screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. According to him, Jake had just been checking if I'd changed my mind, that it was all a misunderstanding, that I was ruining Jake's life over petty revenge. The family explosion was nuclear. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years were suddenly deeply concerned about family unity. My cousin texted that I was probably out of the will now. Dad has $50,000 in credit card debt and a second mortgage. What will? Even my typically neutral grandmother called to say I should be the bigger person and think about the family reputation. 2 days later, I came home to find my door damaged. Scratches all around the lock like someone had tried to pry it open with a crowbar. My Ring doorbell had been spray-painted black. But my interior camera, that caught everything. Jake, in a hoodie but clearly identifiable, spending 45 minutes trying to break in with various tools before giving up in frustration. I didn't warn anyone. I just called Detective Morrison. Jake was arrested at 6 a.m. the next morning at his friend's apartment. The charges: attempted burglary, criminal mischief, and violation of a documented no trespass warning. Dad called me from the police station, where he'd rushed to bail Jake out, calling me a vindictive piece of shit who had crossed the line from family to enemy. Sandra left him that day. She texted me, "This was the last straw. I've been documenting everything for months. Jake has stolen over $3,000 from my purse over the years, sold my grandmother's jewelry, and your father always covered for him. I'm done." Update 3. The court case. Jake's court date was last week. His public defender convinced him to plead guilty to criminal mischief in exchange for dropping the burglary charge. The sentence: 18 months probation, 100 hours of community service, $1,200 in restitution for my door and camera, and a restraining order keeping him 500 feet from my building. But here's where it gets interesting. During the proceedings, it came out that this wasn't Jake's first run-in with the law. He had a sealed juvenile record and 2 arrests as an adult that Dad had paid to make go away, one for shoplifting and one for credit card fraud using Dad's own card. The judge was not impressed with Jake's pattern of entitlement and disregard for others' property. Dad sat in the courtroom glaring at me the entire time. When the sentence was read, he stood up and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I hope you're happy, you've ruined your brother's life over an apartment." The judge threatened to hold him in contempt. Update 4. The fallout continues. The family is completely divided. Some relatives who initially attacked me have reached out to apologize after hearing the full story from Sandra. My aunt admitted Jake had stolen from her home during a family party last year, but she'd kept quiet to keep the peace. My uncle revealed Jake had tried to borrow his car without asking and crashed it into a mailbox. But others, particularly Dad's side of the family, maintain I'm a monster. They keep saying I should have handled it within the family, instead of involving the law. My grandmother has cut me off completely, saying I've brought shame to the family name. The most shocking revelation came from my building management 3 days ago. They called me in for a meeting. 3 other residents had complained about a man matching Jake's description. One elderly lady, Mrs. Chen, had let him in to use the bathroom when he claimed to be visiting his brother, and later discovered her prescription medications and $200 cash missing from her apartment. Another resident reported seeing him trying car door handles in the garage. The building is pursuing separate charges and has banned Jake from the property permanently. They've also implemented new security measures, including requiring photo ID for all visitors and adding more cameras. Update 5. The final straw. It's been 2 weeks since court. Dad has escalated beyond anything I imagined. He showed up at my workplace last Monday, causing a scene in the lobby, demanding I fix this family and withdraw the restraining order. Security had to escort him out, and my boss called me in to discuss the situation. Thankfully, my company has been supportive, but it's humiliating having your family drama play out at work. Sandra has been keeping me updated as she proceeds with divorce. She sent me screenshots of text messages between Dad and Jake that are illuminating. Dad has been enabling Jake far worse than I knew, paying for escorts, covering up a DUI I never knew about, even lying to Sandra about money disappearing from their joint account that was going to Jake. But the worst revelation: Sandra found out through Jake's ex-roommate that Jake had been charging people to use my apartment. He was advertising it on some sketchy, discreet locations website for $50 for 2 hours. He'd made at least $500 before I cut off his access. He was literally pimping out my home. The ex-roommate had screenshots of Jake bragging about his side hustle and how his idiot brother didn't even know. Then yesterday, Marcus called me. Jake had shown up drunk or high, trying to get into the building at 2 a.m. When Marcus stopped him, Jake took a swing at him. Jake was arrested for assault, public intoxication, and violating the restraining order. Dad bonded him out again, putting up his car as collateral because he's maxed out everything else. I found out from Sandra that Dad has now taken out a personal loan to pay for Jake's legal fees. He's telling everyone who will listen that I'm mentally unstable, that I've been brainwashed by corporate culture, and that I'm trying to destroy Jake out of jealousy. He's created a completely alternative narrative where Jake was checking on my mental health, and I responded with violence, calling the police's violence, apparently. The aftermath. So here I sit, in MY apartment that I worked 7 years to afford, with MY beer that no one has stolen, on MY couch that hasn't been defiled by strangers, finally feeling safe in my own home. But half my family thinks I'm Satan incarnate. My therapist, yes, I started therapy because of all this, has helped me see the patterns. Dad has always enabled Jake at everyone's expense. I was parentified after Mom died, expected to be the responsible one while Jake got to be the perpetual child. Every boundary I set was treated as a betrayal. Every success I achieved was minimized while Jake's failures were excused. She asked me to write down times Dad chose Jake over me. Here's a sampling. My high school graduation dinner was canceled because Jake got suspended and needed family support. A dad missed my college graduation to bail Jake out of jail for the shoplifting charge I didn't know about. My 25th birthday dinner became Jake's intervention. When I got my first real IT job, Dad's response was to ask if I could get Jake hired too. When I announced I was buying my condo, Dad's first question was whether Jake could stay there sometimes. The saddest part? If Jake had just actually asked like a respectful human being, to use my place for a special date, I probably would have said yes. If he'd offered to pay me something, or even just clean up after himself, we could have worked something out. But the entitlement, the theft, the violation of my privacy, and then trying to break in, that's unforgivable. Some people have asked why I didn't change the locks after the first incident. Honestly, because I've been conditioned my whole life to give Jake one more chance. Because Dad had me convinced that holding firm boundaries made me selfish. Because I desperately wanted to believe my father would choose my trust over Jake's just once. I've lost my father, half my extended family, and my grandmother won't even speak to me. But you know what I've gained? Self-respect. Peace of mind. A home that's actually mine. The knowledge that my boundaries matter. And surprisingly, some family members who've reached out privately to say they're proud of me for finally standing up to the dysfunction. Sandra sent me a message yesterday that said, "Your mother would be proud of you for breaking the cycle. Don't let your father's voice in your head convince you otherwise." So Reddit, am I the asshole for protecting my home, my sanity, and my safety, even though it meant my stepbrother got a criminal record and my family imploded? Because sitting here in my peaceful apartment, knowing I'll never come home to another violation, feeling safe in the space I earned through years of sacrifice, it feels like freedom. And I'm starting to think that losing family who never respected me anyway isn't really a loss at all. The family I choose, my close friends who've supported me, Sandra who saw the truth, my colleagues who've had my back, even Marcus the security guard who looked out for me, they're worth more than blood relatives who expected me to be a doormat forever. AITA. Maybe some will think so. But I'm a safe, respected, boundary-having asshole in my own home, and that's better than being a violated, disrespected doormat surrounded by family.